on that screen?
A movie? We've just seen one.
You gotta show a movie at a party. It's a Hollywood law.
Listen, everybody, I've got a few little surprises for you tonight. All right, everyone, sit down. Sit down. Listen, this is going to hand you a lot of laughs. There's a man been coming into my office now for months, and, well, you got that gadget working, Sam?
All set, Mr. Simpson.
Okay, let her go.
Hello. This is a demonstration of a talking picture. Notice, it is a picture of me and I am talking. Note how my lips and the sounds issuing from them are synchronized together in perfect unison. Since the earliest days of the cinema...
There's somebody talking behind that screen.
Come on from behind that screen, Mr. Simpson.
No, I'm right here.
Of our pioneer inventor. My voice has been recorded on a record. A talking picture. Goodbye.
Well, it's just a toy.
It's a screen.
It's vulgar.
RF, do you think they'll ever really use it?
I doubt it. The Warner Brothers are making a whole talking picture with this gadget. The jazz singer. They'll lose their shirts. What do you think of it, Dexter?
It'll never amount to a thing. Yeah, that's what they said about the horseless carriage.
Well, let's get on with the show. Okay, boys. Come on, my little star.
A scene from Singin' in the Rain, the classic film, noting a pivotal point in cinema when sound was just coming into being. As part of our discussion tonight, we'll be talking about that aspect of film and linking it to some very modern processes of film on tonight's edition of the movie program on Public Radio KCBX. It's Take Two. Joining me tonight, not adjoining me, but joining me tonight in the KCBX screening room, it's Catherine McDonald.
Oh, and hello. And across the aisle from me is the czar of cinema on the Central Coast. Hello, Jim Dee.
Great to see you, and I think we got a fun subject tonight. Of course, we have the best listeners in the world, and it's really great to be on the air tonight. I've been away for a while, but it's fabulous to be back here, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's show.
We kept the screening room warm for you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Now, you have an announcement.
I sure do.
Important announcement.
Yeah, the SARP Center, the San Luis Obispo County's Sexual Assault Recovery and Prevention Center, is hosting their third annual SARP Night at the Movies. It's going to be held on April 22nd. They have two screenings. The doors open at 6:30 and 9 o'clock, and they're going to be showing a film called Millions. Now, Jim, you've seen this film, right?
Yes, I have.
Come on.
Oh, it's fabulous. Although, and it's a real turnaround for the director Danny Boyle, whose previous efforts include Trainspotting. This is a PG-rated film. It's actually a children's film, charming and fabulous.
It's really warm and wonderful tale. And the SARP Night at the Movies features, they're going to have yummy food, fantastic desserts, champagne. It's going to be a really fun evening with food and this fantastic film. And it all benefits, of course, the SARP Center of San Luis Obispo County. And you can give them a call for tickets. It's 545-8888, and we encourage all our Take Two listeners to go, of course, and it's going to be held at the Palm Theater.
And we'll remind you of that as we get closer, but great benefit, great organization, and we hope you can attend. Well, Catherine, we got onto this subject by talking about Sin City, which currently is in theaters, and the process it took to create this film. Not really new. George Lucas has talked about this, the idea that the actors were filmed in a studio against a blue screen or a green screen, and everything else in the film added in later.
Yeah, and I have actually seen Sin City, and it really it was an achievement. It looks like nothing else. I haven't seen anything that looks quite like it. Even the films that are very highly stylized, there's something really different about this film, and I think that if they had a goal of making it look like a hand-painted graphic novel, they definitely succeeded.
And what we're talking about is how cinema kind of reinvents itself and has done so over the past 105 years or so. This new digital process not only makes a wide open palette for the director, the filmmaker, the writer, but also I think it cuts costs. Perhaps Sin City looks like $100 million film, $120 million. I believe the cost to make it was around $40 million. And
a bargain.
A bargain. Well, if it made something like 25 or 30 million the first weekend, it will make its money back, especially, I guess in these days, a $40 million film is relatively cheap. But I think also because of that digital process where you didn't have to build sets and build all the things that were in the film, they were all created on a computer. Well, it ushering in a somewhat new process for cinema, which isn't that new. Again, the new Star Wars coming out in about a month or so, and word is that George Lucas did the same thing as he did for the last two. Most of the actors are in a studio. Everything else is created around it. So what we wanted to do was to go back to the beginnings of cinema and talk about some pivotal milestones that changed the course, changed the process, changed the way we view films. And in doing our research for tonight's show, I was really fascinated, Catherine, with just some things that I thought had been around for a long time. I thought some of the processes that we're going to talk about had been invented or brought forth at certain times, and they actually weren't. Some of them go way back to the 1800s. And just starting off, the use of color. When we think of film way back when, the very early, the silent comedies, for instance, or even the very early films of Lumiere, the brothers, and like the film Trip to the Moon, which you might have seen with the moon face and the thing sticking in it. Even those films, even though they were filmed in black and white, did have elements of color. There were processes of color, of actually painting the film stock. Other processes where the film was actually treated with a single color, like sepia tone or reds and blues. The original Phantom of the Opera film, made in 1925, had a color sequence when the Phantom shows up at the ball dressed up in a skull mask and in a feathered outfit, and in some prints they were actually hand painted. So the aspect of color, even though we would think that that would have come later on, which it actually did mainly in the late 30s, early 40s, when they figured out how to do it with just a single strip of film. There were other processes where they took like two and three pieces of film and had to kind of meld them together to get the color. But interesting today, Catherine, I was reading about Gone with the Wind from 1939, and despite the grandeur of that film, much of it also was the fact that the entire film was in color.
An innovation, and sort of I think especially the use of color really comes through in that film, is that it really for sort of a, even though you're saying it's been around but for a wide audience, sort of a new technology. This was really, there was so much grandeur held in the elegance that was portrayed using color, sort of the lushness. I'm thinking specifically of the dresses and the shine and the color. It was saying so much more about their status, and especially Vivian Leigh, Scarlett O'Hara. I mean, there was so much tied into the way everything looked, and so it's no surprise to me that that would be those two things would be so intimately connected.
And another brilliant use of color, I think, was the same year, The Wizard of Oz, which combined both black and white and color. And I think they were, in both of these cases, Catherine, I think color was used for an artistic end. I mean, some of the things we're going to be talking about on tonight's show were gimmicks. I mean, color is not one of them, but there are some things that came along on these cinema milestones, these reinventions, where they were sort of flash in the pan sort of things.
Well, even just I'm thinking back to specifically to Wizard of Oz, is that there's also something to be said about Technicolor color. I mean,
yes.
it is definitely larger than life color, and I think that there's some cinematic, the idea of movie magic tied up in such vibrant colors that you would never find in real life, and the yellow brick road exploding in the poppy fields of the Wizard of Oz. Everything just seemed so magical, and maybe it's because I saw it. I first saw this film as a young girl, a young lass, but really that there's something about the Technicolor color that says movie magic.
One that always comes to mind for me, too, is Errol Flynn in The Adventures of Robin Hood. And if you've seen a DVD of that, or if you saw it on the big screen, the color is just really jumping out at you. It's really, really great. Well, we need to go back a little bit because our opening clip was from Singin' in the Rain, and it was during that things were changing in the late 20s when sound came along, and it was regarded at first, I'm sure, as like an oddity, just something strange, and very accurately portrayed in Singing in the Rain, where they show a little film where a guy is talking and they just can't believe it, and they just go, come on, silence, or, movies were huge in the 20s, and the silent greats like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Rudolph Valentino, I mean, they didn't seem to need sound, but sound did come in and really took, it wasn't a flash in the pan, and obviously that was an innovation that is held with us. We aren't going to go back to silent films, even though there's a film we're going to talk about from the mid-1960s that Stanley Kubrick made, which I think he actually incorporated some silence into, but we'll get to that in a little bit later. I also want to talk about a film where special effects were probably where they went all out with the special effects, and this is in the early days of sound. This is a time when cartoons were happening, but never to the extent that this particular film was made in 1930. Hank, you want to play clip number 2?
Now, Ann, in this one you're looking down. When I start to crank, you look up slowly. You're quite calm. You don't expect to see a thing. Then you just follow my directions. All right? Camera. Look up slowly, Ann. That's it. You don't see anything. Now look higher. Still higher. Now you see it. You're amazed. You can't believe it. Your eyes open wider. It's horrible, Ann, but you can't look away. There's no chance for you, Ann. No escape. You're helpless, Ann. Helpless. There's just one chance. If you can scream, but your throat's paralyzed. Try to scream, Ann. Try. Perhaps if you didn't see it, you could scream. Throw your arms across your eyes and scream, Ann. Scream for your life.
What's he think she's really gonna see?
Well, what she really saw was King Kong from, I believe, 1931. I got to correct myself, it was 31. But if you can imagine that this film coming out not only in the early days of sound, but also creating special effects that had really been unseen. There's an earlier version, I believe, of The Lost World, which I think was a silent, where dinosaurs are moving along with the stop-motion animation. But King Kong, to this day, holds up as a special effects milestone, I believe, and I think it reinvented the idea that you can create a complete world of fantasy on film.
And there's kind of playing in the back of my mind is the fact that when we're talking about film reinventing itself, and I'm actually glad we get to talk about it in a positive way, because we often are talking about how film is recycling itself in a negative way. And just hearing this clip from the original King Kong, and I'm thinking we're about to be hit with King Kong again.
Good point, Catherine.
And so that was just kind of playing in my mind as I was listening to that clip. But I like the idea that because special effects are now we just take for granted. We really take for granted. And even seeing the original King Kong, it might not look, there's some, it's very obvious. But I like to think that it's really, the groundbreaking nature of the special effects process, is something that has been created all the way to today, for the fact that we can take advantage of them now. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes sense. But, it's funny when I think about the original King Kong, Catherine, because there are digital or computer-generated monsters or things in films today, where somehow it was created on a computer. And when I'm watching the original King Kong, I mean, there's maybe a little bit of a stiffness or clunkiness in the fact that this is an animated figure, but still there's a depth to this world. There's a little bit more heart in it, let's just say, and the fact that, I don't know, the special effects in the original King Kong work then, they work now, and even though they don't look like digital effects, I think it was a groundbreaking film, and it did sort of open things up at the time that it came out. Really dramatically.
I'm also thinking, too, just in the special effects arena, that how the film, Steven Spielberg's film, The Close Encounters of the Third Kind, really set a new standard for space, aliens, and this the genre of sci-fi and how they use special effects that way. And not only did it set the new standard that was, continually broken today, it's set the new tone for what a blockbuster was, and really kind of opened the door for the connection between these special effects and the film that is going to be the tent pole for the summer, or the thing that everybody and their kid goes to see, and then they buy the toys that go along with it.
Ooh.
Oh, sorry. Did I say?
No, that's okay. That's it's.
That's how it goes, though.
That's how it goes.
That's the
that
business.
is how it goes. Now, we did talk about color film. We did talk about the incorporation of color as a normal, used normally, like in the early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, and then another big pivotal moment in the age of cinema was television in the late 40s, and talk about an impact. In fact, we were talking before the program, Catherine and I mentioning that it is a true statistic that year after year after year, less and less people go out to movie theaters to see movies. And we'll get into the milestone of videos, which came in the mid-'70s. But, when TV came into play, I believe there was a dramatic drop-off in movie-going. And it's funny to think about a time pre-video. It's also interesting to think back when there was no television, where the movie theater was the center of your entertainment. I mean, you listened to the radio perhaps, and maybe your favorite shows or whatever, but boy, to get that really great experience, you went to the movie theater prior to TV. And again, once TV comes, and you can never go back.
We were talking about a little bit about how the idea of the mystical experience of going to the movies, this sort of, building up, and, this excitement about going, and even something so theatrical about the lights dimming and seeing the previews or seeing what's coming next, and everything is just so exciting. And just the fact of being in this environment, and the velvety chairs and everything, that there's so much tied into your environment when you're watching film, that I don't want to be forgotten. I mean, it is important, and so many theaters. There's plenty of theaters you can't even go in and see the film in focus, for goodness sake. So, but just thinking about how it was really something to go out to the movies, and I think it still is. But you're right that there is something that's a little bit diminished about that.
Well, luckily the films were still an artistic entertainment, and when TV first started, I mean, you've got this sort of grainy black and white picture in your living room, even though I think the initial part of having a TV in your living room was so fascinating. It was just this new thing where
the novelty of it all.
The novelty, that's what I'm looking for. But Hollywood and the movie industry responded by saying, well, how are we going to cope with television, and how are we going to get people back into the theaters? How are we going to get them pulled away from their television sets? And of course, the first word out of probably everybody's mouth was bigger. A bigger picture is how to make this, forget about that little TV screen at home. I mean, if you can go to the movie theater and this is a gigantic picture, bigger than you've ever seen before, well, hey, maybe we'll do it. And it was in 1953 that the first film in a process called CinemaScope was released by 20th Century Fox, and that film was The Robe. Here's a clip from The Robe. This is Richard Burton and Victor Mature.
Throw that cloth over me. Did you hear me? Throw that cloth over me. Take it off. Take it off. Take it off.
You crucified him. You, my master. But you freed me. I'll never serve you again, you Roman pig. Masters of the world, you call yourselves. Thieves! Murderers! Jungle animals! A curse on you! A curse on your empire!
Wow. Pretty dramatic, eh?
So wait, the picture's bigger, but wow, the acting much bigger.
Well, those of you who remember The Robe probably don't particularly remember it that well, or remember the fact that this was the first film shot in CinemaScope or released in CinemaScope. And just to try to give a layman's analysis of CinemaScope, can best be described as when you get a DVD that's letterboxed. The CinemaScope picture is more of a rectangle. It's much wider, but if you have a DVD that is letterboxed, it is made from a CinemaScope picture. And this did make a bigger picture. Every studio seemed to have their own version of CinemaScope. That seems to be sort of the catchphrase for this widescreen process. There was VistaVision and Todd AO and a whole bunch of other terms. CinemaScope is the term that has stuck, and there are films today that are shot in CinemaScope. There are others that are what are called flat pictures, which are still somewhat rectangular, but they don't have the wide breadth. And a number of directors really like to work in CinemaScope. As soon as the process was brought forth, Akira Kurosawa filmed a lot of his films in CinemaScope. I know a director, Robert Altman, loves to use CinemaScope. There's probably dozens of others that really like that widescreen process. Now, whether it brought people back into the theaters or not, again, do we remember The Robe and the fact that it was a great movie, or that it was the first picture that looked really big on the screen? No. I think, Catherine, when we talk about some of these innovations and stuff, it really boils down, is the film good? Is it have a good script? Is it something worth watching more than once? And really how big the screen was, or some of these other gimmicky things, which we're also going to get into right now.
Well, I was going to say, but good doesn't have anything to do with how you market it, and selling the big, screen. And I'm sure that, especially if you're looking for it, that's there is something different. A lot of people who aren't really entrenched in the different ratios of shooting the film, that you can tell a film that's CinemaScope just because of the what it can cover in each individual shot. I mean, there is something that looks different, and so especially if you're looking for it, if it's been sold as the bigger and better, and like film like you've never seen before, that's your pitch right there.
Well, I bet, during the 50s when they were getting this process or these different named processes out there of the widescreen, that every trailer, every preview said, filmed in VistaVision or brought to you in CinemaScope. And, of course, I do remember many films from the 50s where before the credits roll, this is a CinemaScope picture, and CinemaScope is, huge. It's all the way across the screen. Yeah. So, bigger was probably better. Did it really get people away from their TVs? I'm not quite sure. It probably did a little bit. But again, artistically, though, CinemaScope pictures are still with us, and so is the so-called flat picture, or smaller rectangle picture. Anyway, I'm going to call that. But also in the 50s, there was another gimmick that got us into the theaters.
That's called Cinerama.
Oh, well, no, we're not at Cinerama yet. We're at 3D.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Forgive
okay.
me. I thought we were going
doesn't happen until...
we're sticking with our chronology.
Yeah,
Forgive me.
Now, 3D goes way, way back. Did you ever have a Viewmaster?
Yes.
Where you put the little round thing,
yes.
And there's two pictures that are sort of juxtaposed. I mean, there's 3D, and those things were around way, way back when. And other versions of those Viewmaster type things were way back when. It's the idea of putting two of the same picture sort of together a little bit off to where you get some depth. And so, again, another lure to get people away from their TV sets. Hey, let's have some movies that are in 3D. Here's a film that was available in 3D, and I'll dedicate this one to Bob Whiteford.
Drop the anchor.
Thanks, Lucas.
Hey, that wasn't a very smart thing to do.
But wonderful. So what was that?
Oh, no. Something's in the net.
Pull up your net.
Come on, hurry up.
Move it away. Pull it up. Come on. Pull it up. Pull it up. Come on.
I'm sensing a guy in a rubber suit somewhere.
with fins and everything. Well, if I would only have to play that for Bob Whiteford, and he would know immediately that was from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. That and another Universal picture, It Came from Outer Space, were available in 3D when they were in theaters in the 50s. And this is, you wore the glasses and it was fun. And I have seen a print of Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D, and those glasses, by golly, do work. There's a depth of field, there's a 3D-ness about it, and it's very interesting. A lot of the lower budget B pictures were, a number of them were done in the 50s, but Alfred Hitchcock used the process once on Dial M for Murder. Also, the Vincent Price film House of Wax was a 3D film, but people just didn't really go for it.
I do have to say, though, most currently, there was a 3D film. We talked about Spy Kids.
Oh,
and that Spy Kids 3, and it was in 3D. And apparently, that was the only acceptable thing about this film, is that it was in 3D. And I think that speaking of gimmicks, I mean, it's a fun gimmick to have, and I think that the youths probably really responded to it. It was probably something, not once again a novelty.
I think it had its day. In other words, I think people did flock to the theaters and how fun it is to wear the glasses and so on and so forth. But, there were different processes of 3D. One was even where you had two reels of film and you had two projectors that were showing two sort of juxtaposed pictures on the screen. And technically, if it didn't work, or if you didn't have the right light on the screen or whatever, it just probably would fall apart. And, if you're going to do 3D, it probably needs to be done in a way. I mean, I was reading today, Catherine, where Stanley Kubrick was predicting that in the future there would be holographic movies, to the point where you don't need any glasses. You just look up at the screen and it's three-dimensional. We're not there yet, but maybe that's our next phase.
That'll be the new thing.
The next thing. You're listening to Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara. Catherine McDonald and I are talking about cinema reinventing itself in many different ways on tonight's program. We have some more things to talk about after the break, and we'll take your phone calls. Stay with us.
I want to go to the movie show, me and my baby. Come on, let's go. On to the movie show. Let's go. I buy the popcorn as soon as we hit the door. My two brothers Bill and Pons sitting in the front row.
Funds for Take Two have been provided in part by Morin Brothers Automotive, starring Frida, the dog of many alter egos, who is always glad to sniff your tires. Morin Brothers Automotive, on Broad, near Tank Farm Road.
Popcorn and candy bar. Butterfly McQueen, she's gone with the wind. I love the film of Anthony Quinn. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Red River.
We're back on Take Two. My name is Jim Dee.
Oh, and my name is Catherine McDonald.
And we're glad you're there listening to our discussion on movies reinventing themselves, a subject that kind of was inspired by Sin City, a film that was actually digitally created in for the most part, other than actors being filmed in a studio, all the backgrounds added later. And it's sort of, not that it's an absolutely new process, but it is a very interesting way to make movies, and perhaps an indication of what we'll be seeing in the future. And Catherine and I are charting interesting innovations, reinventions of the movie process over the years, and we're just getting through the 1950s where 3D was kind of used, and it probably worked for a while. Like you said, they probably got into the theaters with the gimmick, but I know people went in got headaches when things weren't projected correctly, or a little too much 3D. But We do want to go back to the idea of things getting big and bigger. And there was a process that was used, not very much, even though it got a lot of play. I mean, the word Cinerama is something that we probably know because, for instance, in some of the larger cities, there were Cinerama theaters built. And this process, if you're unaware of actually what they wanted to do, took the step. We talked about CinemaScope films earlier and the fact that it's a very big, wide picture. Cinerama took it even further in the fact that the film was created, or should I say filmed, with 3 cameras. The middle one pointing forward and then the other 2 pointing, I believe, outward. So when the 3 pieces of film are put together, you have this massively large film. And Catherine, before we went on the air, you...
I have seen something.
At Telluride this past year, they made a Cinerama presentation.
That's right. And it was a film called This is Cinerama, and it was sort of like an introduction to what Cinerama was all about. And if for those of you who've never seen anything like this, if you've ever seen those still photographs that are panoramas, just imagine that in a moving picture, and you'll kind of get the gist there. And one of the things that really stands out from this experience of Cinerama is it really does capture that feeling of motion. And This is Cinerama really capitalized on that. It had a lot of aerial shots of the United States, and it was because it was set in the 50s. It was very, land of the free, home of the brave theme of sea to shining sea kind of. That's what this film, This is Cinerama, is all about. But they have lots of roller coaster scenes, aerial scenes, and it really does create the sensation as if we are moving in our seats. And it was neat. I really got into it. But the thing that they kind of, just to put it way over the top, is there was a lot of scenes in waters and waterfalls, and they took it to the next level of having people spray the audience with water guns to, and it maybe, think of, having a scary movie and a guy in a rubber suit running through the aisles, trying to terrify people. So trying to create that experience where it's not just on the screen, it's really enveloping the audience into the action. And This is Cinerama it's pretty neat feat.
There was one film, at least one film, that we know of that was shot in the Cinerama process. And here's a clip from that. This is John Wayne and Harry Morgan.
Find yourself in command here.
Why?
I've seen some of the dispatches the newspaper correspondents have filed today.
Oh.
They're saying I was taken by surprise this morning.
You weren't taken by surprise. I was.
No matter. They're saying I was drunk again last night.
Were you?
No. But you can't fight front and rear. Win or lose tomorrow, I intend to resign.
Because of the newspapers.
Because of a general lack of confidence in me.
Oh, don't you think I've ever felt like that? A month ago, they were saying I was crazy, insane. Now they're calling me a hero. But hero or crazy, I'm the same man. Doesn't matter what the people think. It's what you think, Grant. You mean that's Grant?
I reckon.
That's a clip from How the West Was Won. It was filmed in Cinerama in the 3-camera process. And unfortunately, when you think of the great John Wayne movies, you don't think of How the West Was Won. And here's a cinematic situation where you have this glorious, amazing process, but perhaps the film itself wasn't up to snuff. And therefore, I would say that the Cinerama process, despite it being probably spectacular, and you see it in the movie theaters, you got to have a good movie to go along with it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and you broke my heart describing how it looks on the DVD.
Well, I've seen How the West Was Won on DVD, and even with the letterboxed format where you see the entire Cinerama-ness, whatever it is, you see the lines. You can still see the lines even when they put it together. They're You can see the lines. And so now when you saw This is Cinerama in Telluride, Catherine, was it neatly put together? Could you really tell that it was one, or?
Yes. Yeah. The only thing that was a giveaway was that because this was a 50-year-old film, part of it had discolored and wasn't able to be restored to its full glory. So you could see some discoloration on the edges, which did take away from it. But, for having the 3 projectionists run 3 projectors and sync it up, and for it to look like one continuous shot and one continuous projection, I was able to deal with the discoloration.
But was it seamless? Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So,
it was. It looked like one moving screen.
Oh, well, that's good. I mean, it is very odd when I saw the DVD or just the video of How the West Was Won, where you could see very faintly, but you could see the line, and I thought that sort of defeated it. But hopefully, when these were projected in movie theaters, they were seamless. But what a process,
Yeah.
You got it's tough enough.
It's tough enough getting one going here.
Yeah, and you got 3. You have to sync them up, and of course, if you have specific theaters, with projectionists that are trained, I guess it's okay. But let's just say that we can jump ahead to more current times where the IMAX format has perhaps said, Cinerama, you're kind of archaic and hard to deal with, and I can explain that when we get up to talking about the IMAX process. Well, we've been talking about some films that are not that great of films, and even if they're presented in a spectacular format, it doesn't really save them. But I do think that it's fair enough to say that one of the answers to Cinerama was 70 millimeter film. And everyone must have digital cameras these days, but if you remember, if you had a 35 millimeter camera, if you saw the width of a 35 millimeter film in your still camera, that's exactly what movie film looks like. That's 35 millimeter film. You can imagine that running through the projectors. Now, in, I believe, the 50s and 60s, 70 millimeter became, it came to be, and if you can imagine that 35 millimeter film in your camera, twice the width, that's how big 70 millimeter was. And I do believe there were a number of films that were used with this big format that were successful. One that comes to mind, David Lean and Lawrence of Arabia. If you've seen that in 70 millimeter projected, I believe it was filmed in 70 millimeter, it is spectacular. I mean, you can see the grains of sand glistening, and it really makes a beautiful big picture. And here's another film where the 70 millimeter process or film was used, and I also feel that this was a reinvention of cinema. This goes back to 1968. A film started in 1965, and you'll recognize the clip.
Good evening, Dave.
How you doing, Hal?
Everything's running smoothly. And you?
Oh, not too bad.
Have you been doing some more work?
A few sketches.
May I see them?
Sure.
That's a very nice rendering, Dave. I think you've improved a great deal. Can you hold it a bit closer?
Sure.
That's Dr. Hunter, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
Well, forgive me for being so inquisitive, but during the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Well, it's rather difficult to define. Perhaps I'm just projecting my own concern about it. I know I've never completely freed myself of the suspicion that there are some extremely odd things about this mission. I'm sure you'll agree there's some truth in what I say.
Well, I don't know. That's a rather difficult question to answer.
You don't mind talking about it, do you, Dave?
No, not at all.
Well, certainly no one could have been unaware of the very strange stories floating around before we left. Rumors about something being dug up on the moon. I never gave these stories much credence, but particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind. For instance, the way all our preparations were kept under such tight security, and the melodramatic touch of putting Doctors Hunter, Kimball, and Kaminsky aboard, already in hibernation after 4 months of separate training on their own.
You're working up your crew psychology report.
Of course I am. Sorry about this. I know it's a bit silly. Just a moment. Just a moment. I've just picked up a fault in the AE-35 unit. It's going to go 100% failure within 72 hours.
And the film is 2001, Stanley Kubrick's, in my opinion, incredible film. And Catherine, I almost consider 2001 reinventing cinema in and of itself. He created special effects that had never been seen before, making space travel look real. There are moments in this film that are utterly silent, where apparently the film is about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I think there's like 45 minutes of dialogue. So, I mean, here's Kubrick incorporating almost a silent feel to it, and the ambiguity of the film. I mean, in a huge release and 70 millimeter presentation in stereo, which I remember the stereo was incredible when I saw it in San Francisco. Just the fact that you have this film where you really have to interact with it and try to figure out what's going on, it isn't really spelled out for you. I think this film in and of itself was a reinvention of cinema back in 1968.
I can even remember just some of the scenes, and even while you're watching them, there's this like, how is that being done? I'm thinking about the 360-degree rotation of the space station,
yes,
and those kind of things that really stand out. But of course, Jim, you don't ever pass up an opportunity to talk about 2001.
That's right. Well, when I just said it reinvented some cinema, I mean, there was really nothing like it when it came out, and I really think there's nothing like it ever since. And if you incorporate the special effects that Kubrick did have to come up with in this film that can be digitally done today, where it's no big deal. But you've got to look back then where the technology was 1965, and the only computer in the house was HAL,
Right. Well, and also I'm just thinking, too, is that, this was released in 1968, correct?
I believe, yes.
Yeah. And you just have to think about what society was kind of experiencing at that same time. And there's something interesting about telling this story so far removed from Earth. It's really, there's a lot of things that can be compared to, the situation that was going on in the United States.
Yes, I agree. Well, we do want to take your phone calls. We do want to mention a little bit more about, during our break, Hank mentioned to us Sense Surround. And when we got into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, sound kept on improving. Dolby started doing their thing with separate sound. Hank mentioned Sense Surround when you saw Earthquake and you had subwoofers that were making the whole place rumble. So, I mean, not only was the picture changing, getting bigger, going 3D, but the sound was getting more and more elaborate. And another pivotal film I want to say is Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, where the helicopters are flying all over the room, where they really got into an incredible stereo mix and the capabilities to do it in the movie theaters. And before we already have a phone caller, we just want to touch on a major reinvention of cinema, and it's not so much in the movie theaters, but in the mid-'70s to the present, videos.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, talk about a major change. And I guess the thought I'd like to put out is I can't go back to the mindset I had when movies were just an experience in a movie theater. I mean, it is wonderful to have a DVD copy of a classic film where you can watch it at your leisure anytime and see a beautiful print of it on your television screen. But there is something that was lost when you can hold a movie in the palm of your hand as opposed to a movie being an experience only in a movie theater.
I'm also thinking that before the advent of video, that directors weren't making films with the idea that they were going to be seen 100 times, or
yes,
that people are going to own them in their home library and watch them ad nauseum, and that just was not part of the picture, And I have a clear memory of, in a classroom setting, watching a Fellini film, and the professor going frame by frame, using the available technology of a DVD player and advancing frame by frame by frame. I was thinking this was not the intention of how this director made this film, and what we're picking up from these minuscule movements and what have you that's what we're picking up. That's not what was put in there, you know. And there's something about just the home library. I mean, I have one. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
I agree.
But it is different. It is different. Even the director of Memento, he said that part of his inspiration for having things a little bit ambiguous was that he knew that people would watch it over and over again, even not as a ploy, but he knew that this is just how it goes, is you see movies over and over and over again.
Boy.
And it's just different.
It's very different, and I was just trying to imagine how it felt to just think of a movie as something that is in my head still, as opposed to something that I can buy and watch over and over again. A blessing and a curse, even though I'm glad videos exist.
And they make more money today than the box office.
They do.
Sorry.
The industry is video driven.
It's true.
It certainly is. We'd love to hear from you. It's 549-8855, 1-800-549-8855. If you want to weigh in on some technical thing that you enjoyed at the movie theater, if you were seeing a 50s horror movie and, when they had a nurse out front selling insurance policies in case you died of fright, all those kinds of great things we're talking about tonight on Cinema Reinventing Itself. Give us your name and where you are calling from. It's 549-8855, 1-800-549-8855. And good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hi, my name is Saul Morrison.
Hi.
Santa Barbara. And I didn't see it for some reason, but one of the early 3D movies that they ballyhooed a lot when it first came out was something called Buona Devil. I think it was Robert Stack, and it was a jungle type of safari thing where they threw the spear at the audience, at you.
Yeah, when I was researching the 3D, I think that was considered the first. Yeah.
Okay, my goodness.
So you have a good memory.
I didn't even see it. But see, I've been hiding here. I saw that spear coming at me in the premies. But I think the new gimmick that they're going to come up with next is maybe characters you really care about in an original story that you care about. So it's not just people exploding and throwing and huge monsters. And my wife and I actually stood up at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Time and booed, much to our danger.
It wasn't one of my favorites, dare I say.
And you know what? Listening to your the recap there, the audio version on the radio, obviously, of 2001, they not only made the computer so wonderfully human-like. If you listen to Keir Delay, who I went to school with in San Francisco State, he goes down and meets him part way. He's very dummy-like. He's very computer-like. Have you noticed that? They've moved the computer up, humanized, and Keir Delay talks in a monotone. They're all metallic characters.
I think Kubrick intended that.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Part of the brilliance of it. I mean, we don't need anything if the machines are taking care of everything. We're sort of these blobs,
My wife gets very mad at me. She's a children's librarian, and I did not want to go see Harry Potter, and I cannot stand science fiction and science fantasy because they're all the same. And when you have this huge, terrible character, it doesn't make any sense to try and defeat. I mean, it has no meaning to me. There's no one you care about. So that idea of maybe they'll go back to characters you care about.
Saul, you just want it all.
No.
Yeah. But if you read a book, I'm sure you guys know it, called The Liveliest Art. It says that the producers of the different studios, they got together at 3 important stages in the changes in history in cinema, and they made the right decisions in the right time. First, to bring in color or sound? I get it confused. Sound, and then at the next juncture, when they were in danger, bringing in color. And then I get those two confused. And then, of course, the big screen when they were threatened by TV.
Yeah, but I agree with you. The best reinvention is a good script and good characters that you care about.
What a novel idea.
What a concept.
Would you call someone in Hollywood and tell them?
Hopefully they're listening.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Good evening. You're on Take Two. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes.
Oh, good. This is Richard in Santa Barbara.
Hi, Richard.
I was a art director on a 3D science fiction movie shot in the 80s that's very obscure, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, Space Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
With Molly Ringwald and James Strauss.
I remember that one.
Robert Strauss, yeah.
Yeah.
What's more interesting than the 3D aspect is that it was really a heavy metal set. I went to Tucson to the airplane boneyards and sent up 7 semi-trucks full of obscure airplane parts, and then we went to every metal stamping house in Vancouver. It was shot at the Dominion Bridge warehouse, where they built part of the Golden Gate Bridge, and it had a 56-foot triple truss ceiling, and we actually built 3,000 linear feet of metal out of metal stampings, the skeletons from the metal stampings, and all the airplane parts, the wing pods and the missile pieces and airplane junk, and welded it all together. And it was quite dangerous because often you were trying to weld magnesium to aluminum and there would be a fire or explosion. But it was very interesting how technically involved it was and how long it took. And it was shot in 3D, shown in 3D.
Yeah, I do remember the film.
Yeah, it was a flop. It was a disaster of a movie. But
yeah, I don't care about that technical stuff. I want to hear about Molly Ringwald.
So kudos to your last caller, because certainly a film script is the most important thing, and good characters that you want to care about and want to see what happens to is most important.
We agree.
Said like a true Take-Two listener. Thanks, Richard.
Which is why your movie theater, The Palm, is so important, because you show so many foreign movies.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Good evening. You're on Take-Two.
Hello?
Hi there.
Is it me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is, because I'm hearing the radio through the phone. It's weird. This is David Crone up in Cambria. And I missed the very first part of your show. I was shopping. But did you mentioned really early film and the Lumiere brothers and some of the early things that they did to make an extra splash. And did you mention the film Greed?
No, Eric von Stroheim.
Yes, because Zazu Pitts, who most of us, if you're old enough, remember her almost entirely as a comedic actress.
And My Little Margie.
Yes, indeed. But she was the main character, and what they did in the movie to make it really special, I guess it was several different little stories within a story that all had revolved around greed. Every single thing in the movie that was gold was hand tinted on every frame of every print in gold on the nitrate cellulose film stock. So
wow!
When somebody smiled and they had gold teeth, it would that would be the one. Everything would be black and white except for the teeth would be gold.
Good old Eric von Stroheim. Wasn't his original version of that like about 9 hours or something?
Yeah, I think it was. The Euro version, and then it was edited down to something almost manageable for the United States.
Boy, well, that's great. Yeah, we did talk about the very early films that they even hand tinted or colored the stock.
Yeah, they started doing that really early, apparently, like 1900 something.
Yes, they were doing it very, very early on.
And the other one about 1950s gimmick horror films, The Tingler.
Oh yeah,
where they wired up the seats
the chairs, right?
To give you a shock or something.
Yeah, William Castle, I believe, was the guy who did all that kind of stuff.
And I didn't go see it, but I had friends who went to San Francisco from the East Bay. My parents wouldn't let me go. And they said the first time that they had the Tingler go off, the only way you could make the Tingler not, I think, was like climb up on the back of your neck and bite you and turn you into I forget what, was to scream.
That's right.
And anyway, these kids that went and saw it, what they told me was that the first time it went off, about 200 kids went screaming into the lobby from the theater. And how successful that movie was, I never know, because it was kind of here and gone, and all in a few months when I was like 9 or something.
The kids went running into the lobby, but the box office had their money.
I didn't go. I didn't have. This is all secondhand from two friends that saw it in 56 or 7.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I love your show.
Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hey, my name is Herb, St. Louis.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing? I want to throw in just my vote for what I think was one of the great special effects movies and one of the non-special effects movies. And Fantasia, I think, was just wild for its day.
Yes. Yes, it really
I
was.
think, and they even have symphony in the theater.
Yeah, that was groundbreaking, I would say, as
And
far as like.
Every animator was allowed to throw in whatever he thought would look good with his music, which I think was innovative.
Yeah, it was totally innovative as far as really taking cartoons, so to speak, and putting them up to a different level. I agree with you.
Hey, thanks. And but the minimal special effects was Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, the only movie filmed with one take.
Yeah, well,
and they had to follow all the stuff going on.
Yeah, actually, I think the amount of film they had in the cans were about 10 minutes, so they took 10-minute takes, but the whole film does run like a piece of rope. It's like on one continuous take.
So it's almost anti-special effects.
Yeah, but boy.
I'm throwing in those votes. Thanks a lot. Great show.
Love it. Thanks.
Cool. Bye.
Good evening. You're on take 2.
That must be me, James. This is Tom. How
Hi,
are
Tom.
you, sir?
Good, Tom.
You know which Tom this is.
Even I know which Tom this
Tom.
is.
You always call us after work.
I was shooting the bull, as they so to speak, with Hank, and I missed the part about what they were talking about with Molly Ringwald.
Oh, it was a 3D movie from the 80s that Catherine had to know about Molly Ringwald. I believe in jest.
I gotta tell you about Molly. I've known her since she was 2 years old. Her dad's one of my best friends, Bob Ringwald, the blind piano player.
Oh.
And now lives up in the Sacramento area. But he used to have a band in Los Angeles called the Great Pacific Jazz Band. And now he plays with a band called the Boondockers up in Sacramento. But that was beside the point. What I was really going to talk about is you've been talking about all these special effects and things to attract people to the theater, and you forgot one. During the Depression, they used to give away dishes at the movie theaters.
Oh, yeah.
See, I'm old enough to remember that.
Yeah, we were actually talking.
I'm older than dirt.
We were actually talking about like cinema innovations with color and 3D and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But
well, that was an innovation because they had to get people into the theater. I mean, it was a depression, and they had to get them to find some way to get them to spend that nickel or dime.
Wow.
And that worked, and it worked very well. They'd be crappy movies, but great dishes.
Well, that's a great incentive.
And now it's become collectible because it's called depression glass, and it's become very collectible when you can find the stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that's great.
Anyway, I have not met Catherine, but hello, Catherine. I'm Tom. And I've
hi,
known
Tom.
Jim and Jim Dee for many years, right, James?
That's right. Come on down to the station sometime again, and you can meet her.
I will. I'd love to meet her. I'll do that sometime when I get off the air on my way home.
Great, Tom.
Okay, I'm going to see you guys later, and thanks. Always a good show.
Thanks for the call, Tom. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, Catherine, we're out of time, and I apologize to our remaining callers because the phone's lit up completely, and
It just means we have to talk about it again some other time.
we'll talk about it again. I want to thank Hank for being the best projectionist. Always good to see you, Catherine.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening to Take Two, the movie program. See you next week.